Hey y'all, welcome to the Athlete's Health Deep Dive, the weekly episode where we get a mental performance theme of the week and dive deep into its insights through some simple and easy tips, tricks to remember it, and tools to apply it. And the goal here is to just bring more value to the audience, the coaches, the athletes, the parents, anyone giving you a glimpse into some themes and topics surrounding mental performance and these longer conversations and what some conversation points in our coaching could entail. Now, ultimately, we aim to help you out, getting you using these tricks, adding these tools to your tool belt, your bag, and up that mental performance. Then at the end, hopefully you're a little more intrigued to come check out some of our coaching services. But each week we have a theme, and this week's theme is self-compassion in competitive environments. We're being somewhat kind to ourselves while still striving for that excellence. And that is the key that we're going to be talking about here. And before we dive in, I just want to point out upgrading the studio more and more. Check it out. Give me feedback. Let me know what you want to see, what you want to hear as we keep developing this and leveling up this moving into 2025. But with that said, let's dive deep into that self-compassion in competitive environments and, more important, striving for that excellence. And I want us to first think back to a previous game, practice, competition, whatever you name it. Did you give it your all? Think about this. Did you give it your all, but then still find ourselves kind of replaying that one mistake that we had, right? And we're not only replaying it, we're replaying it over and over and over again, right? We push ourselves to the brink in this quest for excellence. I am totally okay for that. And I'm not saying let's not do that or let's step back. But I am saying sometimes maybe we push it a little too far, right? We set these super high standards. And listening to this, you're probably striving for that best. You're trying to get that edge. That's what the mental side, the mental training does. It sharpens that sword, gets you on that edge so you can cut through, beat that competition. And this is great. But in this process, we often sometimes kind of to forget to treat ourselves with that same kindness or grace that we give to a teammate or a friend. And so today, we're going to be balancing that drive for greatness with that self-compassion, if there even is such a thing, because we are our own worst critic and we might not fully balance it, but we're going to try to balance that scale out a little bit here, because being excellent doesn't mean being perfect, right? And so being kind to ourselves doesn't mean just giving up on our goals. So we're going to try and get the best in both worlds here. And that's why we got tip number 1. Pause to reflect on achievements, because it's easy for us to get caught up in that hustle, right? We're striving for that next goal. We climb the mountain, we just go right to the next one. We just keep wanting that success. We can't turn it off. But if we don't acknowledge, the journey is going to start to become overwhelming, stale. It's going to be thankless. And that's kind of the main thing that we're going to hit on here, because we can go through all this, but then it's always like, what's next? Therefore, we really need to try and implement this trick of celebrate the summit. And we can just spend 5 minutes at the end of each day, each week, just reflecting on what we did accomplish. What was one thing that we did well? It can be a big thing, it can be a small thing, but if we're trying to win that day, if we're trying to move that needle forward, keep climbing up, we need to take that pause and just quickly reflect, spend that 5 minutes. And with that, we can write down a win list. We can do this at the end of the week if we want, where we kind of remind ourselves, see that progress, track it. When we write it down, we can actually see it, just like our stats. If we're not tracking what we're doing, then we're not going to know. And so I just want to put this in perspective, that it's like climbing a mountain, where are we just going to climb straight up to the top and not turn around at all to look at kind of what we're summiting, what we're climbing? When we recognize that each step forward is key to sustaining the motivation, it's really just like turning around as we're climbing up that mountain, soaking in that view a little bit, and then saying, all right, we got more to do. We're going to keep climbing. And that's exactly what we're doing with tip number 1, pause to reflect on the achievements with the tools of spend 5 minutes a day, not even, okay, reflecting on just one thing you did. And we're going to add some tips, tricks, and tools to this on how we can do this. Otherwise, we got that day 1, we got the week of a week's win list, and really kind of just remind ourselves of the progress with this trick of celebrate the summits. Tip number 2 is treat yourself like a teammate. One thing to say this, another thing to actually do it. Therefore, we're going to try and really implement these things, and I'm going to try and express this to you in a way that we can understand and grasp and really move on. But we're cheering on others, right? You can probably think of practice where, hey, good work, hey, nice shot, whatever the case is. We offer that support and encouragement when they're down, when they need it, when we were trying to boost them up for the team. But I bet you know that we don't always do the same thing for ourselves. No, we think about that play, we think about that play and this play that we messed up. It's putting us back, right? But how often, unless it's like a big play, I'm sure we do this sometimes, do we think about a teammate's mess up play? Like they made a turnover. You're like, yeah, dude, yeah, you made one turnover, but you did all these other things. Like, you're good, dude. Meanwhile, in the back of your head, you're probably thinking, man, that one steal that I should have got that I didn't got, that's just eating me up, right? We're not treating ourselves like a teammate. So once again, I like to refer to mirrors. We're using this trick of a mirror talk. In a challenging game of practice, or even if it's not that challenging, write down 3 things you would say to a friend that's in your position. So step out, you're looking at yourself in your mirror, but it's not a mirror. It's a friend you're talking to. It's that person who's with you 24/7, 365, never leaving. Every minute, that person in the mirror is right next to you. They're your friend. What would you say to them? Okay. And now you're saying that to yourself because we can practice this good game statements. Tell yourself one thing you did well after each performance. It doesn't have to be too complex. It can just be these one little things. And we're going to start to see these patterns build here. But we can kind of think about how a coach, like you probably have a coach, and they balance critique. They tell you, hey, maybe try this better, try that better. But they also give you the encouragement. They pull you out of the bench. Hey, you need to work on this and that. But I really like that effort in there, and I'm putting you back in the game. We just need to kind of refresh, kind of even catch your breath, get a drink, and you're going back in, right? We can adopt that same approach for that inner voice. Tip number 2, treat yourself like a teammate. The trick, the mirror talk tools, challenging game of practice. Look in the mirror. What would you say to your friend, that person who's with you through? Thank you for listening in and watching the Athlete's Health Podcast. I just want to put this on your mind here. Upgrading the mental side of both the athletics and life, tying it into the physical stuff that we are doing. Come 2025, our mental gym is going to be revamped to studio level video quality, and our worksheets, everything will start to be licensed out to organizations, to schools, places to implement this. If you want to check out the mental gym, let me know. Otherwise, we got our online community where we are diving deeper into these deep dive subjects each week, live Q&A with the online community group where you can ask any questions about any of your teammates or anyone in the sorts, and we can hash out those mental sides and elevate the game in the online community. Otherwise, our one-on-one coaching is still leveling up. Let me know if you want to be a part of it as I keep taking on more athletes, coach them on the mental side, and sharpen their skills very specifically to their needs. Otherwise, keep enjoying this free content. I love to help you out, give you the value. If you want a little bit extra sauce, check out the weekly newsletters every Sunday. Free trick and tool on this topic that only people on the newsletter get. Check that out at the website, theathleteshealth.com. Thank you for watching and leveling up your mental game. 365 and get those good statements going, just like a coach. Tip number 3 is build a self-compassion routine. Now, I like when I say self-compassion, it kind of makes me almost think like, it kind of puts that little twist. I'm just like, I don't know if I want to be using it like that, but I think we are going to roll with it because the routine aspect anchors us, right? It's something day to day that we do. It's also going to help encourage, see those wins, see that success, ultimately showing a little more compassion to ourselves, right? Like we are that teammate, like we are that friend, like we are that coach into these daily habits, right? We want to make this a second nature for anything we are doing so we can attack each game refreshed. This self-compassion routine should make us refreshed. And the trick here are these 3 G's. I use this every night before bed. This is kind of what refreshes me, how I know I'm winning my day. And I know I'm going to be going over these 3 G's throughout the day. So I'm like, all right, I got to get something going. I got to get this going for me. And it's just as much in my athletic endeavors, and as kind of the business stuff picks up more and I sometimes have to take a step back from the athletic side, it's just as much in that as it is the athletics. It's the whole life, right? Because this message ultimately ties to the life piece too. These 3 G's: given, great, grown. How do I do this? The tools now. Pull these out of the tool belt. At the end of each day, I reflect on given. How did I give to someone today, right? We give to ourselves, and we do give to ourselves, but one of the best gifts to ourselves is giving to others. So that's the first thing. How do I give to someone today? Second one is great. What great thing did I accomplish today? What did I check off my list, get accomplished that's been on my calendar, on my moving forward up the mountain, next thing that I needed to grab onto to climb up to that next summit? And lastly, grown. How did I grow as a person, as an athlete today? What workout did I crush? Did I try to crush? What thing did I do to help someone out? Right back to that given thing. What did I learn today that's going to progress me forward? These are all things like we studied that move us along in that athletic event, and also just going to tie into everything else we do. As every athlete I have on here talks about how what they do in the sport ties to everything else they're doing too. How we can do this: a journal app, track these. Otherwise, just before bed, kind of reflect in my head. Now, it's one thing to reflect in the head, it's another to actually write it down. So I do like to write these down as well, but I still do it right before I go to bed too. It kind of gives me that peace. And it's, like I said, it's not just me, it's athletes who I've been talking to about this, who I've been coaching through, who say doing this aspect really separates. It's not just the game, which it is all about the game, right? But it highlights the other important pieces. Tip number 3, build a self-compassion routine. The trick, the 3 G's at night: journal, app, just reflect in the head, whatever it takes. Given, great, grown. How do we do those 3 things for the day? Tip 4, reframe criticism. And I'm not talking about criticism from coach or from teammate or from the other team. Those are great criticisms to get. And that perspective, sometimes it can be hard to hear, but that perspective really can level us forward. It shows us our weak links, what we want to strengthen our overall game. But who is your own worst critic? Kind of give it away. You are your own worst critic. So I should have asked, who is your worst critic? And it's you, right? And that is a very common thing in these competitive environments. The criticism does not have to be destructive, though. It can be a great, great tool for our growth. And that's why this trick is a sway, don't sink. Because I want us to think about like we're in a boat. And I'm going to get to that for a second here, but I want to kind of also highlight the tools of how we are doing this. We need to analyze the performance, all right, as if we're giving feedback to someone else, right? Fair and balanced. Separate it out. You're not giving feedback to yourself. You're giving it to someone else. You're giving it to that player who was playing on the field earlier in that day, who was practicing earlier today. What would you do better when you're watching film? You're watching that athlete play. You're separating it, right? And sway with this. Learn and lean into that constructive criticism and learning to sway, kind of keep that neutral mindset. A lot of athletes, so the reason I say this, and I got an analogy for you, but a lot of athletes say, we don't get too high on the highs, we don't get too low on the lows. We're kind of just floating back and forth, kind of separate from it and sway with it. And so it's really like a boat rocking in the water, right? We don't want to ride up a super steep wave. We're not surfing. We're trying to keep that boat afloat. And conversely, we're going to be rocking, swaying with the ocean. If we're staying up tall on that boat, we're kind of just rocking with it, right? Those feet are moving some. We're feeling that boat shift between the legs as we shift that torso, that upper body back and forth to keep that center mass right where we are, right? And hopefully we're not getting seasick. But the goal here is to stay afloat while we're keeping moving. Some of those waves might be bigger, some might be smaller, but we're kind of just separating ourselves from that actual criticism, right? And we're swaying with it. We're staying neutral. We're not getting too high on the highs on the good things. We're not getting too low on the lows on the low things. We're riding that boat out with tip number 4. Reframe the criticism with the trick. Sway, don't sink. Tools: separate. And then lastly here is tip number 5. Rest is progress. I need to tell myself this sometimes, even though I will say I'm not trying to be hypocritical. That's not the word. I don't know. But drawing a blank here. That's so unfortunate. But I'm not trying to say one thing and do the other, because this is probably the one I need to work on the most too. But resting doesn't mean we're slacking off. It is very essential for growth. Our muscles, like we're doing the physical training, right? That is the mental, we're tying the mental piece into the physical stuff. So let's break down the physical stuff here fast. We are breaking down muscles when we're doing any stuff in the weight room. When we're doing these sprints, either the muscles or the neural system, the nervous system is being broken down. It's being stressed. We need to give it that rest to stay stimulated so it can be stimulated to its full potential. And the mental side, the mental resilience is the same thing. So this trick is the recovery rule. We really kind of want to set a schedule, an active recovery in the weekly routine. We're planning this out. Otherwise, if you're like me, we're probably not going to do it. So we got to block out those nights when we're going to actually do a little more active recovery, where we're not going to send it, where we're going to actually separate ourselves a little bit more, like what we were talking about. The other thing that we can do with this tool is to set a timer during the work or the training sessions to remind ourselves to take the short breaks, because we might be nose, head down, going at it full steam. We might hit a couple walls. We might even break through those walls, even if they're brick walls. But eventually, we're all going to run out, and we want that energy to break through the walls. But we want to make sure we're stopping, we're getting that rest so we can progress faster before we start to break down and cannot break through those walls, because otherwise then we're gonna have to take a long, let's say then we run into one of the walls and we can't break it, we fall down, get a couple breaks in there, get a couple sprains, and all of a sudden we need to let that all heal before we can then get after it. So now we're gonna have to rest even longer, and the progress we could have made long term is dwindled. And high achieving athletes, entrepreneurs, business people, anyone in life really say over and over that they need that rest, they need that little separation. That is their secret weapon. They take that break back. And I have to remind myself of this. I keep telling you that because it is so important to me, where take that step back and all of a sudden that success, oh, it's a secret weapon. All of a sudden they are fueled, ready to go. So really think of it as sharpening the axe, sharpening that sword. And we're doing it through that mental edge, like we keep talking about before we chop down that wood, break through that wall. Tip number 5, rest is progress. Trick, the recovery rule with the tools. Schedule out that rest period, set a timer, cut yourself off, keep going if you feel that flow, but then understand what you got coming in the next couple days so you can plan that accordingly. All in all, we covered 5 key tips, tricks, and tools for embracing that self-compassion while still striving for excellence. And I really hope that kind of got put on notice here, that it's almost, we looked at self-compassion, which once again, I feel almost a twinge when I say that because I'm so much on the mental performance side, but we look at that in a different lens. And the 5 things that we covered was tip number 1, pause to reflect on achievements. We can celebrate the summit, right? Take a moment, recognize the progress, and stay motivated as you climb that mountain. Turn around, see the success that you made thus far. Tip number 2, treat yourself like a teammate. Use that mirror talk. Speak to yourself with the same kindness, the same gentle nature, whatever motivation you're going to be doing to a teammate, what you're given to them. Number 3, build a self-compassion routine. The 3 C's of given, great, grown. Reflect on how you've given, achieved something great for that day, and grown every day. Journal it. Think about it before bed is what I do. It kind of helps me wind down and get ready for the next day. Number 4, reframe criticism. Sway with it. Don't let it sink you. Use criticism as a tool for growth without letting it drown that confidence. Rock with the boat, baby. And number 5, rest is progress. The recovery rule. Embrace rest as a necessary part of achieving your goals. Self-note to myself. But I just want to leave you with, being your best does not mean we're going to be perfect. What we do have is that balanced self-compassion, that ambition. We're building that mindset that can handle the highs, the lows of competition. We sway with it. We are still striving for excellence, and it can start with being that kinder teammate to ourselves, and watch how it transforms our journey towards that excellence and really crushing the success. See you this upcoming Thursday for our guest podcast, and see you next week for another The Athlete's Health Deep Dive.